the same time to find a connection between those who may have authored these ancient writings, who wrote these things. And remember the number 45, fifth. And we have a special for you on this tape, and for the folks that are sitting here. We're going to talk about something that is known to many, spiritualism in the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah. Kabbalah. But what we're going to talk about tonight is Kabbalah magic. Okay. Kabbalah magic. The practical Kabbalah of what, that word is defined as a magical system. Isn't that interesting? A magical system based on esoteric doctrines of the Jews. Esoteric means within. Okay, within. And so you'll see a word here that's interesting for Christmas time, which is magi. And of course that's where the word came from. Magic, magi, astrology was their forte. So we look at esoteric, that which is within spirit, magic, about what they referred to in those days as magic was the things that we refer to as manifestations of the spirit. To them, it's magic. We'll define, of course, this is the doctrine of the Jews, spiritual Jews. We'll define that later, but to understand, of course, that a Jew is one who dwells at the right side. Let's let that go for now. We won't get into that. A Jew is one who dwells on the right side. So when we talk about Kabbalah magic being the esoteric doctrine of the Jews, let's then define that word for ourselves so we can see if we can fit into this. Go on to page 920 in Little Bibles, in Romans chapter 2, page 920, Romans chapter 2, and let's take a look here and see if we can define a Jew, the word Jew. Basically, if I was to say to you, what is a Jew? You'd say somebody who lives up in New York, looks like this, and I don't know, my name is Isabel, what's this, I'm a fakakta, that's it. No, it has nothing to do with that. That's a religious base of a group of people who live in the Middle East, but that's not what this is talking about. We're talking about Kabbalah magic, which is the esoteric or inner doctrine of the Jews. And what I want you to see is, do you qualify? So let's open the Bible to page 920. You have your little Bible, Jeff. Open it to page 920. And look at Romans chapter 2. And go to verse 29, verse 28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Now that's interesting, and that's very, very important. There's a statement by one of the prime Bible writers, Paul. He is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. Now that's important. That takes the whole thing and changes it. Say, God's chosen people is not a race of people who lives in a particular portion of the planet Earth. God's chosen people are those who dwell inwardly at the right side, the Jew. And so then Kabbalah magic talks about that which is within who? You and me. That's Kabbalah magic. The intellectual or the intricate rituals of the Kabbalists connected with something called laws of correspondence and the tree of life. And that's the entire aspect of Kabbalah, okay? Let's just take that off there. And we'll talk about the laws of correspondence and the tree of life. That's Kabbalah magic. Kabbalah is extremely complex, very, very complicated. Very, very difficult to understand. And right here, we're only going to skim the surface so you get an idea, just so that you can walk out of here and say, well, I know that, this exists. I have a basic idea what these people were into, okay? The Kabbalah set out to familiarize themselves with the paths of the tree of life. And remember, this is an inner tree. Albert can tell you that the human body actually, if you were to take and diagram, it looks like a tree. The trunk and then the branches spread out all over. Looks like a tree. And that's basically what the tree of life is. The tree of life is you. The tree of life is me. But what they did, they got themselves involved in trying to trace this tree of life from an outward standpoint, and so they got involved with the divine and angelic names of invocation through prayers and chanting and incantation. All of these types of things were very, very ritualistic, very spooky. See, that's what this was. This was the Kabbalah magic was built around chanting and invocations and all kinds of things. Many of you may not have too much understanding of this, but what you see as a kind of an evil thing springs out of the ancient Kabbalah, which was the, oh gosh, I hope I can, the five-pointed star. Not too good looking, but anyhow. But then each point connected. It's called pentagram. Pentagram. Cool. And that was they would invoke the power of the pentagram, and they would banish the power of the pentagram, the five-pointed star. And it was used as a magical symbol. And it emanates, all this stuff emanates out of Kabbalah. Very, very spiritual, very, very magical. Okay? And quite interesting, because it was part of the Jewish religion. If you go into Lakewood or some of these other places, you'd start mentioning Kabbalah in front of these people, they're gone. Just like if you start mentioning the kingdom within, the right hemisphere of the brain to Christians, they're gone. And they want no part of this stuff. It's spooky. There was an ancient magic group, and I would name this for you.
Hermetics?
They studied very strongly, the Kabbalists did. They were called the Hermetic Order.
Smart man.
Do you see something here in that one? You see the word hermit?
Hermit crab, bitch.
Huh? You see where things come from? Those who stayed alone, those who stayed in the caves, those who experienced this loneliness and darkness. The root of that word. But that was the Hermetic order, and there was a part of the Hermetic order known as the Order of the Golden Dawn. And the Kabbalists used to be deeply involved in studying from that ancient order, the Order of the Golden Dawn, of the Hermetic order. That word hermit comes out of the word Hermetic. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of this. The oldest piece of material to ever show writing of any kind is known as the Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
Kathy may be interested in that, being interested in stones and things. The Rosetta Stone is the most ancient document in the world. There was writing on this stone. It's the oldest piece of writing ever found in the world. This one. And actually on this stone is the writing of Hermes, Hermes. Hermes. And on that stone, Hermes is called the Great and the Great. The Great and the Great. And then this is an important part. He is, on the Rosetta Stone, defined as the divine intelligence of the higher mind. Is that interesting? I'm telling you that the very first writing that people ever found speaks of Hermes as the Great and the Great and the divine intelligence of the higher mind. The first thing that was ever seen that was written. This is interesting. What they used to do in Greece, you go traveling off these roads, and there would be these little shrines. And they were places where people would stop and worship Hermes and the Hermetic order. Now, they're exactly in the same place, but they've been replaced by Christian shrines. But actually, the shrines originally in those spots were of the saintly people who followed in the order of Hermes. Now they're, you get St. Lucy and St. Beatrice and St. Barbara and St. Charlie and all these stuff, but it's the same stuff, exactly in the same spot. They just changed the names. It's the same.
Classic.
Now, this is basically what Kabbalah was involved in, studying this ancient order, studying the strangeness of this Hermetic order the hermit type of personality, the hermit type of religion, if you would, and these things of Hermes and the higher mind. But the problem was, there was a very serious problem with Kabbalah. There was a very serious problem with Kabbalists, and there was a very distinct reason why it didn't work.
They couldn't write it down.
The reason was that the Kabbalist groups tried to bring down power for worldly reasons. That's what they were into it for. They really were not concerned with a spiritual path. They wanted to get something out of it. They wanted to see something. In other words, they were gonna raise the roof with some kind of a ritualistic thing until they saw something happen. You know, like basically you see in a lot of religious or Christian groups today, it's the same thing. You can see the people on TV. They can get very, very emotional. They want to see something. You know, a guy will pick somebody's crutches up and throw them on the floor and make the guy get up and run up and down and stuff. There's no spirit involved in here at all. There is bringing power down to make some kind of a physical demonstration. And most of the time, according to the history of the Kabbalah, these Kabbalists would fail. They couldn't do it. It wouldn't work. And as today, Christianity failed. And you know, see, if they can't bring the power down and cause something to happen or change your life around, if you continue in poverty or if you continue in ill health, well, they don't say it's not the power came down. You didn't accept it. Or you didn't have enough faith. Or the devil did it, not us. See? It's all the same stuff. I mean, of all the healings, that you've seen on television, for every one that's reported in some kind of a religious healing, you can find the same kind of miraculous healings out of hospitals of people that have no knowledge of God whatsoever. And you know, you hear a lot of people say, well, I've seen people on television say, well, we were at a crusade and this lady came down and she didn't have an eye and all of a sudden an eye formed in her head and all this kind of stuff. Show me the doctor report. I don't want to hear that stuff. Trash. Okay. But this is what Kabbalah failed at. This is what religion fails at, trying to produce a flesh and blood type of thing out of spirit instead of melting in and becoming one with spirit as we've been instructed to do. Now, occasionally something would happen as it does in religion today, but more often than not, what occurred was that since the person was not following a spiritual path, but they were energizing this divine energy, the energy would follow through the lower channels, and it would produce problems for the person. The person would wind up with all kinds of problems because the energy that they were turning loose within themselves, the electrical energy, was actually flowing downward, and all kinds of things could happen. It's just like we talked about when people are deprived of sleep or something like that, they can become neurotic and have all kinds of, not when they're deprived of sleep, but then when they're deprived of dreams. They can become neurotic and have all kinds of difficulties. So this is what happened with the Kabbalists is what happens with many in religion today. Instead of just functioning in the spirit realm and letting spirit do it, they tried to force it and had difficult things occur. Because basically what we learn out of this is never, ever should you try to appropriate spirit selfishly for producing physical things for yourself. Because you can get yourself in such a state that you're liable to produce something in your body that is not positive, that is negative. I remember going into a Christian church, and seeing something on the door. It says, come expecting a miracle. They always had that on the door, come expecting a miracle. That's dangerous. Because what you're saying is we're going to create some kind of an emotional thing here until we make something happen. If it doesn't happen, we'll make it happen. And so it's no longer a flow of spirit, it's a flow of emotionalism. Jesus was aware of this. Jesus was aware of Kabbalistic magic, and he would say the same thing of charismatic magic as he said of Kabbalistic magic. And he said it on page 786 of your Bible, which is Matthew chapter 11. So we look at, here what you had is people who were on track with the truth. They really were on the right path, but they misappropriated it and it failed. Okay. And in the same way, many in the Christian realm